that sheer force of grit and steel is impressive, but there is a drawback of empathy, because as a leader, you can hold on so tightly to a goal and then not see how it's affecting your team, not see that the resources aren't available. When we talk about resiliency, yes, having a determined focus on the goal is important, but it's also being adaptable, being able to bend and flex and not be so strict.
Welcome to the Manage Self, Lead Others Leadership podcast with Nina Sunday for experienced and aspiring people managers. This show will help you explore ways to become a more intentional leader. Each episode, host Nina Sunday speaks with some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share a passion to elevate and transform team culture. Workplace culture hides in plain sight. Is yours flourishing? Join the movement to make your workplace a better place to work. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others.
Corey Jones is CEO and co-founder at Prismwork, a culture transformation company centered around the HEARTI framework, described in the amazing book I just finished reading, Intentional Power, The 6 Essential Leadership Skills for Triple Bottom Line Impact, co-authored by Corey Jones, along with Leeson Stromberg and Jean-Ann Nichols. HEARTI offers a new model of leadership built on 6 core competencies: humility, empathy, accountability, resiliency, transparency, and inclusivity. Intentional Power argues that to truly deliver triple bottom line impact, PPP, people, planet, profit, modern leaders must build their HEARTI power skills. From Dallas, Texas, welcome Corey Jones.
Thank you, Nina. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm really excited to talk about leadership with you today.
Thank you. Now, I really appreciate you send me a copy, or your agent sent me a copy of your latest book that you co-authored, Intentional Power. And I thought, oh, yes, this will be a good leadership book. I didn't realize it was going to be a seminal model that really everybody can go by. It's up there with Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's up there with Ray Dalio's Principles, Life of Work. I am truly impressed.
Wow, thank you. That is very high praise, and I am honored to be considered with such leaders in this space, and that the work brought that much value to you.
Absolutely, because you've described it in behavioral terms too, because the old traditional leadership was, theoretical and not really down to this is the behavior that you do. And at the end of every chapter, you give an outline of the behaviors that will be applying the different attributes, the different qualities. So we'll go through them one by one. We have to try and keep the conversation down to sort of under 30 minutes if possible. But, if it goes longer, I'm sure that the avid listeners will sort of stay with us and listen through to the end. So, but I understand that all of this is based on research that your company that you're CEO of and co-founder, Prismwork, led to a lot of findings that resulted in this HEARTI model. So can you tell us a little bit about that research, please?
Sure, absolutely. I'll back up a little bit. I left my last corporate job in 2019, and out of leaving it, having a career of leadership roles, entry-level roles, middle management roles, executive roles, I learned a lot about what it takes to be a leader. I was able to witness a lot of leaders stumble and succeed in my journey. And then I also made a lot of my own learnings as a leader. And when I left that last job, I said, I really want to focus on leadership. I had been an avid study of leaders, reading John Maxwell and studying and working with people like T.D. Jakes and reading like Ray Dalio, all of those people that you talked about. Leadership was kind of calling me. And I said, how can I focus on modern leadership what it means to be a leader today, because it's definitely different, because what I experienced and what I saw and my peers was not sufficient, and that was in 2019, and had no idea that in the next year we were going to see COVID.
Oh,
And
what is it? The Black Swan event that has changed
yes,
everything. And to some degree, some things have changed for the better in some areas.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. But this, as well as all of the cultural strife through in America, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, this racial cultural tension, Me Too was rising, where women were actually speaking their truth and understanding that their voices were powerful in this fight against abuse and toxic workplaces. And all of this stuff was swirling. And Nina, these are all attributed to leadership. It's the leadership at our companies, and building places of belonging where people can do their best work. And in that approach of knowing that as a high level that leaders are always going to be face challenges and look to lead a team through those challenges to the other side, we started to talk to other corporate leaders. We talked to experts in organizational behavior. We talked to all kinds of people. We did surveys. We talked to thousands of people to understand what are the leadership skills that that are successful to you. And we kept seeing these themes rise to the top: humility,
yeah, absolutely, yeah,
empathy, accountability, resiliency, transparency, and inclusivity.
And of course, they talk about leading with emotional intelligence. This is almost a textbook in that. So well done.
Yes.
And I love the new language that you bring in, because now we talk about modern leaders, capital M, capital L. And
that's right.
It's the HEARTI, HEARTI framework. And the first one is H for humility. And I learned a new word, which is decentering. Decentering is a critical skill in humility, where a leader steps aside to let others shine. Can you tell us about that, please, Corey?
Absolutely. Humility really starts at recognizing your own limitations. Sometimes when we get caught up in leadership, we think that we have to carry the burden of knowing everything, of being everything to all, having all of the solutions, when honestly, we're limited. We cannot do everything, not to the highest level of excellence that's expected for these organizations. That's why we bring talented people in to work with us, and inspire them to do that work. So when we decenter ourselves, we're recognizing our own limitations as leaders to say, maybe I'm not the best person that can handle this, or maybe I don't have the best approach. Who are some of these brilliant minds that I'm working with that have great skills, that are better at crunching numbers or doing whatever, that I can lean on? And so I take myself out of the solution set and I bring and elevate these others around me that can perform at a higher level.
And absolutely, when you give credit to others, especially in front of others, they will feel like contributing more. Nothing stops people from wanting to give their extra effort, an extra contribution, than if the leader takes credit for an idea or some action that someone else took and don't give credit to it. So it's definitely a critical skill.
Yes.
Now, also in the area of humility, there's the Dunning-Kruger effect, which some people have heard of, and I've heard of it before. It's a cognitive bias when someone overestimates their own capability. So while overconfidence often leads to people actually believing that they're competent, but when there's a big gap between confidence and competency, that's a bit of a red flag, really. So how is the Dunning-Kruger effect a pitfall to avoid for the modern leader?
Well, again, it goes back to recognizing your own limitations. The Dunning-Kruger effect, when you're doing that, when you're overconfident, you have pitfalls. People start to recognize that you're not competent, and then you lose trust. Your team starts to question your motives and question your ability to lead them through a challenge or to the next, to that goal. So again, it's always easier to say, I don't know, or to take a step back and let someone else step up, so that you can have overall team success, because ultimately that's the goal, right? That you succeed as a team, not that we succeed as a leader and that I'm the one who accomplished the goal.
And
We did
that's the interesting thread all the way through. You talk about this principle of from me to we, because
That's right.
if a traditional leader thinks that they have to be the source of all knowledge, the decision maker, and not go to their people with go to people with answers rather than with questions, and let's resolve this together. That's where the Dunning-Kruger effect tends to rise, because it's this old traditional approach of, well, I have to be seen as the one that knows all the answers. That's not true today, is it, Corey?
That's not. We have to realize today that everyone brings an inherent power to the table, value to the company, to the team, to the project. It doesn't rest on the shoulders of one person where they have all the power. Yes, they may have the title. Yes, they may be recognized by the company with that authority for whatever reason. But until that leader can recognize the power that their team brings, and the fact that because they're attributing leadership to you, they're surrendering some of their own power. They're saying, okay, we trust you as a leader to get us to the next step. So yes, I'm going to surrender some of my own autonomy and ability to make decisions because I trust that you're going to get us there. So when we understand that as a leader, that should give you a great responsibility to know that you need to be hearty. You need to have that human connection in order to honor the power that people are surrendering to you. And so you have to surrender to your own limitations by being humble. You have to open up your own heart by being empathetic and moving on someone else's behalf. And you have to surrender some control sometimes by being accountable. Yes, as leaders, we have to be accountable to others. It's not just about holding others accountable. We have to surrender some of that control.
That's right. And I love the phrase, we need to be hearty. So now I understand to describe the model, which is the hearty model, we need to be hearty. So, and shortly we'll talk about the next attribute, which is E. But before we do, you talk about an evolving self-leader, a self-aware leader, with humility seeks feedback. Now, that can be hard for traditional leaders to do. The modern leader is probably more willing to do that. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, because feedback is like a lifeline to your own growth, and it removes, like if you're a driver and you have side mirrors and a rear view mirror, you still have blind spots. That doesn't cover all of the vision behind you. You have to turn and look to get a better look for yourself. And sometimes that takes asking directly the people that you're working with, how am I doing? What needs to change? How am I helping you succeed? I mean, it doesn't always have to be negative. You can get feedback of like, how am I helping you be a better? How am I helping this team? Because that is also very, very valuable for leaders. They don't always get that to understand, how are the people seeing them? How can I use this feedback to be even better or more effective as I move forward?
And of course, you can do that in a private one-on-one conversation, can't you? I wouldn't be encouraging feedback in front of the group, but one-on-one, people can be honest, because you have to be confident that they're coming from a good space of giving honest feedback, not trying to pull you down, not being competitive. That's right. But asking for feedback implies that you trust that you've got an adult-to-adult relationship. How important are brief one-on-one meetings with all your direct reports, and what's the frequency do you recommend?
Oh, it's imperative. I mean, the larger your organization, the larger direct reports you have, of course, the more challenging that is. But you certainly should not be waiting for your quarterly or annual review to get an understanding of what your people think of you, and also how you can support them. One-on-ones, it's a two-way street, right? You're providing a platform, an opportunity for your people to share what's successful for them, what challenges they may have, and how you can support them in that. And then, yes, how can you get better as a leader? When I was an executive leader and even a manager, I definitely spent, now my team size grew, but I tried to do at least once a month one-on-one meeting with each report to get an understanding of, I of course had a large overview of what the team or what the department was dealing with or handling from a performance standpoint, but what do you as a team lead need? Like, how are the relationships with your peers? How are you getting the work that you need done? Do you have the resources that you need? Is there some training that you need? How can I support you? So you get that feedback from them, how you can support that team. But of course, they're going to tell you, hey, I didn't like the way, you assigned this project to me because I already had this going on. But that allows for you to either shift, give them some reasons of like, here's why that I understand that frustrated you, but here's why that had to happen. And it gives you a platform to be very transparent, which is, again, we'll get to later, but very transparent with that team member. And yes, one-on-ones are definitely effective. I will say it depends on the organization. Some organizations, Nina, are very transparent, and having a small group or a larger team meeting and having real constructive feedback with a leader is very effective and efficient. But there are a lot of toxic workplaces and a lot of political games that get played in corporate America, and it's not always fruitful to set yourself up as a leader to a firing squad, if you will, for people.
That's right. That's right. So you got to pick. What is it? Pick the situation, and you don't want to be in a situation where politics will get in the way. What you want to do is actually it's utopia, isn't it? Have the ideal workforce with people that don't have any hidden agendas. But we're working towards creating frameworks that will actually route out that unresourceful behavior. So, but look, after H in HEARTI is E for empathy, and there are three types of empathy that you talk about in the book: cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. But why is empathy so hard in the workplace?
Empathy's hard because you have to use it all the time, and you can't pick and choose when to be empathetic, right? So if you're going to be empathetic that, yes, this part's not going to come in on time. If you're in supply, the part's not going to reach the factory in time. And so you have to then adjust your goals and understand how to make that happen. A lot of leaders understand that. But then when you have a leader that says, hey, I've got something happening with my family at home, and I need to step away for 2 or 3 days to address this, well, that's going to have an effect on the team. And a lot of leaders may not be as empathetic to that. Or it might be the other way around. So being empathetic is challenging because we're so performance driven and accountable to those goals that anything that gets in the way or disrupts it, it's hard to hear. And it's hard to hear that life is happening when life happens to all of us. Right. If anything, COVID showed all of us that we had to be very empathetic to understand that the needs of the people we're working with on a daily basis have changed. And the person that's sitting next to me is going to have different needs than the person that's sitting down the aisle for me.
And if you have been a traditional leader or of a generation that grew up in that traditional leadership style, it's really easy to just gradually modify your behavior. If you understand what the modern leader is and the definition of the new modern leader, then we can really just incrementally improve the way we do things. And that's why the HEARTI framework is so easy to understand. Now, in A, we've got being accountable. So, accountability. I know Patrick Lencioni talks about team members being accountable to each other. And I think, well, you've got to learn the right speak. You've got to learn the right language in order to the person that you want to say, pull them up and say, you're not doing your bit. Mm-hmm. How does a leader do that in a way that doesn't distance or disassociate someone from you or alienate someone from you? It's tricky.
Well, that's, again, all of these skills are so interconnected, right?
Yeah.
And when you're being accountable, I'll qualify it with this. If your team is all aligned on the purpose, if they're purpose aligned, then it's easier to say, hey, what is happening with you, the situation you're having, however it's affecting you, it's affecting our ability to meet this goal. So as a leader, again, we have to step in and be empathetic in that moment of accountability to say, how can I support you? What do you need? Because your tasks are slipping behind. The report that we needed that was supposed to go to leadership did not make it, or I was not prepared to go into the meeting because I didn't have your insights and data. All of that hard work that we we're expecting didn't get to make it. The leadership didn't get to see it. And I didn't get to tout how wonderful the work is that you did and celebrate you in front of that team. So there are ways to draw attention to the purpose of why we're doing things. And if someone's not motivated, how to inspire them to say, hey, we've agreed as a team. You may not like the accountability now, what's happening now, how you're being addressed, but this is something that we agreed upon, earlier, at the start of this project. So we can adjust after this if we need to, but right now we have a dependency on you to meet this goal. So how can I support you in doing that? Right. Again, offering how to be a servant in that, but really making it clear that we are missing the mark, and it is due to them.
Okay, you talk, Corey, about the team agreeing to things. Are we talking big picture, agreeing on how we do the work? Or is it what? Just tell us more about that. What are people agreeing to, and how do they agree to it?
It's setting accountable leaders are more likely to hit their performance goals. Those who set OKRs or objective key results or set KPIs, yes, key performance indicators, they're more likely to hit those goals because everyone sees what we're trying to achieve. Right. And when we understand, hey, we want to reach this many people in this quarter, and everyone can attach their tasks, their details, their actions to pursue that goal, then everyone is accountable and you're more likely to hit it. When there's no purpose, when there's no goals or objectives set, it's harder to hold the team accountable and say, hey, we aligned to this, because people say, I didn't even know what we were trying to do. So how can I be accountable to something where I'm not clear? So when I talk about team accountability and alignment, it's setting the purpose and having a true understanding of the objectives and goals.
Okay, so that's probably because we've got a traditional leader that thinks I'm the one that needs to know what we're doing. I just really issue the orders and make sure everybody's on track. But people need to have a bigger picture of what is the organization as a whole trying to do, or what is this whole project as a whole trying to achieve? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Which feeds into transparency. Again, they're so interconnected. A transparent leader can help a team be more accountable because they're not hoarding the secrets. All right. As you talked about traditional leadership, it is about secrecy. And when I think it's good for you to know, as opposed to sharing information and allowing the team to work together with that information to find the best way forward.
Yeah, great. Well, now we get to the R in HEARTI, which is resilience. What's the problem? Okay, you have a really interesting discussion on grit, and that there's a problem with grit as it has been interpreted by people. So let's explore grit and the inherent assumption inside this concept of grit.
Sure. There's a lot of attachment to grit, and like in the States, when you talk about someone that's holding on to something, they might say they got that dog in them, right? That dog that'll grab onto a bone, not let it go for any reason. And that sheer force of grit and steel is impressive, but there is a drawback of empathy, because as a leader, you can hold on so tightly to a goal and then not see how it's affecting your team, not see that the resources aren't available, not see that you may ultimately even miss the goal because you're holding onto it so tightly because of market pressures or a new leadership vision or something that gets in the way of that goal. So when we talk about resiliency, yes, having a determined focus on the goal is important, but it's also being adaptable, being able to bend and flex and not be so strict on the methods, like you mentioned, the how, that you miss the opportunity to get to the goal in a more effective way.
May I take just a minute to tell you about one of our partners that helps make Manage Self Lead Others happen, Apex Trader Funding, showing futures traders how to execute entries and exits with precision. Apex Trader Funding educates people in what is a futures contract, how to make money and hopefully avoid losing money with a futures contract, how does a trade happen, different markets to trade, how to make the decision to trade. And I must mention this disclaimer, you have to put in the learning time to really know what you're doing, to manage risk and manage profit, to know when to withdraw your profits and invest them elsewhere. How to start? Go to the FAQ tab at apextraderfunding.com. That's https apextraderfunding.com. Follow the links to do the masterclasses with Apex Investing Institute. Now, here's a promo code. When you are ready to apply to get started with funded trading with apextraderfunding.com, use my code Nina Sunday for the listener discount of 25 to 50% off. I invite you to go to episode 106 of Manage Self Lead Others podcast to find out more with my conversation with Daryl Martin of apextraderfunding.com. Now it's back to my fascinating conversation about HEARTI with Corey Jones.
And then let's just be really clear, life continues to happen. There are many forces beyond our control. The economy, there's wars that are happening right now, and affect all kinds of things, the mental health of employees that we're working with, the supply chain, the leaders, the visions, what they plan to do in the next year. There are so many things outside of our control that we have to be able to adapt, and keep our eye on the goal, but at the same time figure out an alternate path to get there.
Yeah. Well, then when we talk about the attributes or the core traits of resilient leaders, what you list is very similar to, I did an interview a little while back with Dr. Novak and about resiliency. So I'll put in the show notes a link to that episode. So it talks about having an internal locus of control, being intrinsically motivated instead of externally motivated, and also being self-aware, having a pragmatic appearance, acceptance of reality. So do you want to talk a little bit about how can someone increase their attributes of resiliency? And this can be good for anyone, whether they're a manager or an individual contributor.
Yeah, I think the flip side of resilience is grace, is the ability to have grace for yourself, and for the people around you, because again, there are things that happen outside of our control. And so as we adapt and move, we sometimes get caught up on this didn't happen the way I saw it or that I knew that it was going to happen. And so we take that as a fault while still progressing towards the goal. So if we give ourselves grace, we can still see that, we hit those targets. And it allows us to, again, it feeds into empathy of understanding when our team members are affected by things outside of their control, how we can have grace to say, okay, how can we incorporate a new strategy to move forward?
And of course, one of the ways the book mentions to increase resiliency is to accept micro failures as opportunities for growth. And that's having a growth mindset, which is also one of the traits of a modern leader. Yeah.
Absolutely. Understanding that that you've not gotten there yet is the one thing. Last year or 2 years ago, I would have been saying, I'm not an author. And I should have been saying, I'm not an author yet, because I have now achieved it. And having that growth mindset of adding yet to something, it really helps you to understand that that is not necessarily a failure. It's just an opportunity for success delayed.
And also, Corey, what was brilliant is you did it as a collaboration with Leeson Strongberg and Gina Nichols, which are also in the organisation Prism Work. They have other roles. And what a beautiful way to do it. You did it from me to we, we are
Yes.
co-authors rather than putting all that weight on your shoulders. Brilliant. Very good.
We really developed this concept of HEARTI together, and we formed this company, Prison Work, to bring the message of HEARTI to corporate leaders. It's my attempt to leave corporate America, or the corporate environment, not just America, but the corporate environment, better than I found it. And that's what Prison Work is. And then Jean Ann and Leeson have been teaching this at Stanford and California to business leaders all over the globe. So as we've helped to build this framework of HEARTI, and we've actively been using it in the world, we said the best way to do this is to collaborate. Right now, there are challenges. How do we get a unified voice? How do we, prioritize what goes in there? But all of that, it was a completely HEARTI experience, which doesn't mean that it was easy. It means
No.
that there was a challenge for us to come together. But extremely proud of the work, and really excited by the response that we've gotten, because leaders are continuously telling us that these are the skills that they need, and when they master them, they see a lot of success in their workplace.
Yes. Well, now we come to the T in HEARTI, which is transparency, and possibly, I mean, AGART, that's nice, but I think this could be one of the more tricky attributes to explore, transparency. So it builds employee trust. It fosters collaboration. So how can we develop more transparency in the workplace? I mean, we'll talk a bit about Ray Dalio, who talks about radical candor. Do you know, I've brought up radical candor and they go, oh, that sounds hard to me. So is there a better term than radical candor?
I like radical candor. I've spent years in creative. And so a lot of that is making people think differently, how to peak their brains. And sometimes we use words that are like spotlights to say, oh my gosh, look here. And radical candor does do that. You can't be reckless, right? So radical candor, but not reckless,
Yes, good.
how you share information. So there is still a bit of discretion that's needed. But if there's no reason to hoard the information as a leader, share it with your team. I'm sure there's some insights. They've had some experience, or they've had some understanding of that data to say, here's an alternate perspective. Here's something you may not have thought of. And it takes that trust of your team in order to get the trust from your team, to trust that you can share this information with them, and they're not going to take it and be petty with it or anything like this, that they are all adults. And as we share relevant information to them about where the team's going, how the company's doing. I mean, a lot of times as leaders, we're asked to kind of shade the negative of what's going on because employees might bolt or jump ship. Whereas sometimes they're just looking for you to be a real partner and say, hey, we're having some challenges now. Here's why we're making certain decisions on budget or making certain decisions on this. And they're included and they feel like they're brought along in the decision making, as opposed to edicts coming down because their leadership never shared anything for them for months. And then it seems like, oh my goodness, where did this come from out of nowhere?
And you know what? When information is withheld, especially if there's financial challenges with the organization, if leaders don't share, people pick it up and they make up their own story. And often the story that they create in their head is worse than the reality. And they might
Absolutely.
jump ship because of some story they've created in their head.
That's right.
Not due to reality. You're much better off saying, listen, we're going through a rough patch. We all need to pitch in. And honestly, people will respond to that truth. Isn't that right?
That's absolutely right. Again, they feel like they're being brought along, not kept in the dark. All it takes as a leader for you is to lose that trust one time, for you to have either told a little white lie or to not share some pertinent information that the team could have, maybe hit their goals even faster if you'd shared it earlier. For them to say, I'm going to discount everything that you say to me. I'm not going to believe it, or I'm going to question it.
Never once lie, or people will really doubt you forever. So you
That's
can't.
right.
The white lies just are not lack integrity. And of course, with accountability and with transparency, what goes with it is psychological safety,
That's right.
how you express that transparent thought. Any
That's right.
thoughts on psychological safety, which is in the book as well?
It is a hot topic. In fact, it's one of those terms that, like radical candor, has gotten it's like a lightning rod. A lot of people think, well, why do my employees need to be psychologically safe? They just need to be, well, we've got health insurance for them. What does that have to do with them doing their job? And psychological safety means a lot for everyone. I mean, we can dive into different groups and identities, but for the neurodivergent, for sure, having the ability to know that they are psychologically safe in their quirks, in their divergence, to be able to bring their best work allows you to get the best work. For people to know that their employer, their team lead has their back with all of the mess that's happening in their family or in the world today, and it may affect how they show up at work. Maybe they're depressed because of the news. You can tell them to turn off the TV, but if it is affecting them, it is going to affect how they perform. So setting up a resource where your employees can be psychologically safe, physically safe, just safe all around, and have good well-being is a good best practice for a leader to have. And what provided is an approachable way. We've heard this all the time from leaders, chief HR officers, learning and development officers. You provided an approachable way to discuss psychological safety, because whereas people thought of it as nebulous and not really wanting to get into it, or thought as a very negative thing, they now have language to talk about psychological safety.
Exactly. It's a term that allows for the fact that people can express maybe what's a harebrained idea, but they're not going to be judged for it or disapproved because of it or criticized. Because otherwise, if you criticize people because they shared an idea that was maybe a little bit left of field, they won't share another idea. And you've got some people that are introvert deep thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
They will take it to heart if they share an idea and it's not at least received. Just sharing an idea doesn't assume that you're going to say yes, agree, and do it. But you need to be open to people just sharing ideas and welcoming that and thanking them for that, and say that we'll take that on board. So it's about that acceptance. Yeah.
And some people may not be introverted. Actually, Nina, they may be choosing to be introverted because they've been ignored for so long, right? There's tons of accounts of women and people of color that will say, well, I just won't speak up because I know every time I do speak up, someone's going to talk over me. They're going to disregard it or discount it. Or someone else is going to say the same thing and get all the credit. So I'm not psychologically safe bringing my best, of sharing my insights and data, of speaking up in this meeting because it's going to be disregarded.
Yeah. Just before we move on to the I in HEARTI, I got to the chapter on transparency, authenticity, and code switching. That's a new term for me. Can you tell me a little bit more about code switching? I saw it as I Googled it, it's speaking different language to different people, but is that how you mean it, or?
It is language, it is culture, it's shared meaning, it's all of it, right? So code switching is, yes, there is a standard way of speaking, of interacting with people, especially in corporate spaces. I'll say it's a lot like how we're talking now. We're speaking in English. We're speaking, clear English, where anyone listening into our conversation is going to have a touch point to say, I understand what they're talking about, right? Yeah. I can follow along. And when you're code switching, that means that you also have another way of communicating through your mannerisms, through your speak, through your language and your vocabulary, through the way that you carry yourself, the subjects that you talk about. And you don't bring those into corporate spaces because it makes people feel uncomfortable. But what's a growing sentiment is the ability to code switch and be comfortable bringing your whole self, because there might be
Oh,
someone
I see
else.
what you mean. Not pretending to be somebody other than yourself at work.
That's right.
Not being one
That's
person
right.
at work and another person outside. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So especially when you have someone that has a shared identity at work with you, you may talk a certain way. I may be talking to another black man, American black man, and we're saying, I might say, they got the dog in them, and you're like, what does that mean? I don't get that, right? And so code switching doesn't always allow you to bring people in. It's not always the most inclusive thing, but it does provide a shared experience and that sense of belonging, ability for people to be themselves in your workplaces, on your teams, in your spaces. So there's a rising call for people to stop code switching and just be themselves and
Right.
let
Interesting.
everyone
Yes. So
catch up.
I love the different terms and language that I'm picking up that I now will incorporate in my own work. There are lots of stories too, and I was intrigued by the one about someone, a company having a salary party. We're at the party. Will you tell us how the salary party went?
Uh,
That's the
help
one.
me.
That's the one where they all get together and they write
Oh,
down
yes,
on a
yes, yes.
card what they, and then they
Exactly.
suddenly reveal it together.
So,
And the men were
so
shocked. They didn't believe that women got lower pay, and suddenly they found out that's true.
there were a group of leaders, and they were sure that everyone was having equal pay. Of course, most of these leaders were men, and they said, "Okay, let's compare. Let's see." And all of the women knew, right? It's like they knew that they were being not paid, and so when they shared, like you said, all these men were shocked. They could not believe it, and went into action to say, "Hey, how do we get pay equity? How do we restore the balance? Because this is not right."
So before we end this wonderful conversation, Corey, I do want to mention about when in your book, because I got the audio book as well. And my favorite way to read a book is to get the audio book at the same time. I can be driving around doing errands, but then I've got the real book to go back to and see the words with my own eyes. So I love doing it that way. And I found it interesting that it wasn't just DEI, it was DEIB. And I went, oh, what's the B? B is belonging. And we've got
Yes.
another episode just on the rules of belonging. So it's lovely that you've now created a new language around DEI. It's DEIB, diversity,
Mm-hmm.
equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Belonging. Thank you. Thank you for that question. So HEARTI is really kind of the heart and foundation of prison work. It's our way into leaders. We really are focused on powering modern leaders to get the tools that they need for their team so that they can have success where everyone can thrive. And the first way to do that is, of course, they can read the book, purchase the book, and get a true understanding of HEARTI. We also have an assessment called the HEARTI Leader Quotient, and you can go there by heartiquotient.com. And what happens is it takes about 10 to 15 minutes, if you will, to go through a series of questions. And as you mentioned, these are all behavioral questions, not theoretical, but how do you show up as a leader? And it's self-reported. And what you find is what your strength is. We know that you're strong. Everyone understands each of these components of HEARTI. We don't expect everyone to be fully HEARTI all the time, right? Everyone's brings an individual leadership style, and they're going to have individual strengths, those things that come naturally to you. So in this assessment, you'll understand what that is, what comes naturally to you. From, you might be a very empathetic leader and everyone is willing to come to you and share their thoughts, and you're able to put that into actionable task. Or you may be extremely transparent where you share everything and everybody knows, what's going on in your life and the workplace and everything else. There are some drawbacks, of course, to all of these
Maybe
strengths.
you're an oversharer.
yeah. If you over index in them, but you find out what comes naturally. And then you also understand where you're vulnerable, right? Maybe you're not as humble as you are inclusive. And how do you, now that you know that about yourself, how can you move differently, but it really is about you understanding how you show up in the world as a modern leader. Then we have other tools that, just outside of that. We have a 360 version. So it's not just self-reported. Then you have other people answering those questions for you. And you say, I show up this way. And then they say, no, you show up this way. And you get a real reflection of what your intent is as a leader. Is it being reflected back to you by how people experience your leadership style? We'll take those assessments. We'll do leadership development. We work one-on-one. We use it to work one-on-one with executive leaders and do coaching so that they can become more hearty. We also use HEARTI as a way for leaders to understand how to be better allies in the workplace, how to navigate the new challenges that they may face. We've introduced HEARTI to leaders on how to do remote or hybrid working in the heart of COVID. Instead of forcing people back in the office, we used HEARTI to help people get a real plan and talk to their middle managers and their frontline workers to have a real approach that everyone agreed to, was aligned with, and they were successful. We've used it to help people launch ERGs. We've used it to help leaders, like I said, be better allies in the workplace. And so HEARTI is really a universal tool set for leaders to apply to the challenges that they face. And when you have a better understanding of how you show up as a person, and then when we work with teams, you understand how you show up as an organization. Are you a more resilient organization? Or are you a more accountable organization? We help to lead.
So you can actually do a profile for an organization, not just an individual. That's
right. That's exactly right.
So with accountability, Corey, is there anything else important that you'd like to mention about that attribute?
Absolutely. I think the primary thing that people think about and understand with accountability is performance and profits. How do we make money? And most companies are dedicated to meet the needs of the shareholder in that way, that the profit is king and it is the most important thing. But it's not just that singular bottom line that we talk about when we talk about accountability. It's the triple bottom line. It's not only how do we make profits, how do we protect the planet and the people that live on it? So when we talk about accountability, we move it to 300% accountability, where we're considering all stakeholders. And when we say all stakeholders, we include the earth as a stakeholder in that conversation. And so how are we accountable to the planet that feeds us, that protects us, that nurtures us? And how are we accountable to the people that live on it, that we share it with? And that means our coworkers. So accountability is bigger than just the money in our pocket. It is also about how we meet the needs of the planet and our people.
And that is so important, Corey, that you've put it in the subtitle being for triple bottom line impact, PPP, planet, people, profit.
That's right.
Well done. It's a perfect mix and a wonderful goal. So, Corey, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an honor to speak with the CEO of Prism Work and the co-author of Intentional Power. Really interesting read, and I refer everybody to get this book. And as I say, get the audio book as well. It's beautifully read by a professional. So I thank you so much for your time and much success with all your ventures. And thank you for helping to elevate and transform the workplace culture.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina, for having me. Thank you for allowing me to talk about intentional power. It's been quite a joy to launch this project with Lisa Stromberg and Jean Ann Nichols into the workplace and into the market. For people to read it, and the feedback that we're getting is amazing. So I really appreciate the time. I appreciate your thoughtful and insightful questions. It has been a wonderful conversation, and I can't wait to get to Australia.
This episode, I was speaking with Corey Jones, CEO and co-founder at Prism Work, a culture transformation company centered around the HEARTI framework. The book he co-authored with Lisa Stromberg and Jean Ann Nichols is Intentional Power, the 6 essential leadership skills for triple bottom line. Go to the show notes for a link to the HEARTI assessment, and do so within 45 days of this episode, and there is a code for you to get a discount. Thanks for listening to Manage Self Lead Others. I'm your host, Nina Sunday. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you like about Manage Self Lead Others. Suggest a speaker or an author to have a conversation with. And until the next episode, enjoy good things.
Nina Sunday is on a mission to help leaders transform culture. To book Nina Sunday CSP to speak at your conference, visit ninasunday.com to request a proposal. Nina travels from Brisbane, Australia for in-person presentations Australia-wide. Twice certified virtual presenter, Nina Sunday presents virtually, globally, for any time zone.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.